We're joined now by Dustin Hoffmann of the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Dustin, we're now seeing some of the estimates of the number of acres in terms of corn and soybeans that were impacted by that windstorm. What can you tell us about what you're seeing on the ground, though? What do those crops look like? Are they done for, or will some of those be salvageable?
We had 14 million acres down total that's been damaged, over 5.5 million acres of beans and over 8 million acres of corn. Now, as Secretary of Iowa Agriculture, Mike Nag, said, it doesn't mean it's toast. There are fields behind me right now that are still green in spots. There are places where there is some yellowing and some browning going on, depending on where you're at. Now, I'm just about 8-9 miles north of Des Moines, but right now, if you go further north and west, and of course off to the east where more of the damage hit, you're going to see more browning and more yellowing of that corn. The soybeans, for the most part, seem to have taken it really well, but soybeans generally do in these situations because they're lower to the ground and they're closer together, so the wind has a tougher time really tossing them around. But they did get tossed around a little bit. It's the corn that is really going to be the story on how much of this survives, and that's what we're going to start to see here. I'm afraid by the end of the week, we're going to start to know what's surviving and what's not if it hasn't already turned.
Dustin, I want to ask you about the physical agriculture structures. We've seen quite a few of those pictures on social media, grain bins and other storage being damaged.
I could go with miles in any direction here, and I could show you hundreds of grain bins that have been crushed like empty soda cans. Right behind me, about 4 miles, is the town of Slater, and that town had a major grain bin, had its probably several 100,000 bushels. The top ripped off like it was nothing, and it's half caved in. Just a couple miles beyond that is the town of Madrid and also the town of Slatow, and both of them are in utter devastation with trees on top of houses. The grains going there first, the grain storage is really going to be the story. There's grain legs down all over this area of Iowa and further to the east. We had a weather station, again, this is an unofficial weather station, just about 3/4 of a mile north of Ankeny, which is the northern suburb of Des Moines, register 106.9 on that wind speed. We heard estimates of over 100 miles an hour in several places around here, and if you look at the structural damage out here, it's not hard to believe at all.
Wow, that's crazy to think about. Let's talk about that cleanup effort, though. Are folks getting things cleaned up in terms of those streets and getting power restored?
There are several rural communities. Of course, everybody hears about Cedar Rapids, and Cedar Rapids, not to take anything away from them, that is a disaster area. Their city manager said that the floods in '98 were nowhere near as bad as this because there, yes, it was flooding, but only about 15 square miles of the city was affected. Now all 75 square miles are affected. There are people that cannot communicate there, whether it's calling loved ones on cell networks or getting internet capability. It's just really a bad situation there. But there are several rural communities out there. I was out driving around a bunch of these rural communities last night, the ones I just mentioned, Slater, Huxley, Slatow, Madrid. The thing is, I could tell when I got closer to Des Moines as I was weaving around to the countryside because my phone would light up with alerts as soon as I got into a cell tower by Des Moines. You got further north and the cell phones weren't picking up. Ames was without power, and Ames is a bigger city as well, where Iowa State is located. They were without power for several days. They just got it back last week again, towards the end of the week. But again, the roads are being cleaned up. I saw today another country highway has had its road closed signs removed. There was a lot of power lines down and a lot of roads that were closed in and around here and made travel and getting around this area difficult, to say the least.
Dustin, is there anything going on right now where you're at in Iowa that's not being talked about by the national press that you want to get a message out there for?
It's basically, I would say, as much as I don't want to take anything away from the people in the urban areas who are suffering, it's the small rural communities and agriculture as a whole. That's the situation right now. We're not talking about the fact that the grain is down and the fact that the farmers are just taking smack after smack after smack this year and last year as well. The people need to know what the farmers are going through. Yes, a weather event is something that can't be handled by any political party or affiliation, and it's not here for debate. It's something that just happens. But it just seems like the farmers are getting heaped upon more and more. These small rural communities who are agriculturally based for their economies are taking hit after hit as well, and it's really starting to take its toll. So if there are people out there that are willing to donate, yes, and like I said, I'm not taking anything away from a major area like Cedar Rapids, and they really need help. But don't forget these rural communities, the ones that are less than 1,000 people or less than 5,000 and 10,000 people even. Those communities are really hurting and they really need that help. And they're considered the flyover parts of the country, and so they don't get that attention.
Well, we hope the right help can get in those right areas. Dustin Hoffmann of the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network joining us. Dustin, sure appreciate your time.
Yep, no problem.